All right. It is time for our weekly pleasure to have Brian Baldinger on the show. Baldy, first of all, great game you had last night in Miami. You're still down there. What a wild ending you got to see.
Oh my gosh. I mean, when it was 27-13, I thought we were going to cut to the game up in New York and Green Bay, and we stayed with it. And thankfully we did because Tennessee scored 2 touchdowns in a minute, including a 2-point conversion to win that game. And it was just a meltdown by Miami. But I mean, Will Levis, if you haven't had a chance to see or watch him play, I think he's going to be a good one for a long time.
Well, we look forward to that. But let's turn our attention to the Eagles because speaking of meltdowns, it feels like the city is melting down after these back-to-back blowout losses against NFC contenders. And when we talked last week, Baldy, you made the case that the onus was a little bit on the offense in that game heading into the matchup with the Cowboys because we knew the defense's struggles. It was going to be on the offense to keep up. And obviously they did not do that in this game. 3 fumbles, no touchdowns on offense. They did move the ball. But I want to ask you about one specific part of the passing game that Zach and I have been talking about. Jalen Hurts threw 28 passes in that game, every single one of them to Dallas Goedert, A.J. Brown, or Devontae Smith. He didn't throw the ball to anybody other than those top 3. In your estimation, is that a good thing because you're getting your good players the ball, or is it a little bit too predictable? Do you need to make use of the other guys who are eligible receivers?
Well, it's out there right now, Bo, that this is a predictable offense. I mean, the players have said it. It's been hinted at. It's been showed. I've showed some of it. I mean, it is a predictable offense, and they do have to find some creativity to it. And that doesn't necessarily mean, throwing the ball to other guys. You can feed your playmakers. I mean, A.J. Brown's never going to shy away from getting targets. But I think, the running game is not taking off right now. They're not staying with it. Sometimes it's the score that dictates it, but they haven't been good at it. Outside of the game against Buffalo, where, they had a bunch of big runs in it, including, Jalen Hurts having, the game winner. Outside of that, they really haven't found runs that they're good at. And we're 14 weeks into the season, but you can't say, okay, they're good at power. I mean, I haven't shown any clips in weeks of Landon Dickerson and Jordan Mailata just leaning on guys and moving bodies. And that's something I think we all kind of took for granted, that the offensive line was powerful and they could move bodies, yet they kind of shy away from it right now, and they're not very good at it.
The term creativity with offense, you hear that quite a bit. And there's the play design itself, and then there's the play calling. Do you think the creativity needs to be with the design of the play and the scheme, or how they're calling it?
I think it's the creativity of the scheme. I mean, they run a lot of one-on-one routes, whether it's against zone or man. Even, on the 4th and 8 late in the game, Stephon Gilmore, made the tackle on Devontae Smith for 3 yards. You go 4th and 8, really throwing a 3-yard route. I mean, it's a pick route in the middle of the field, and A.J. Brown did a lousy job of picking in the middle. I mean, Stephon Gilmore easily got underneath it. And so just the details of some of it, when you get man beaters. But I see a lot of just one-on-ones out there, go win your route, and let Jalen decide. And obviously he's holding the ball a long time, and he's not making great decisions, and they're not getting the big plays right now. And that's really what's been missing. And then obviously they had 3 drives going, and the fumbles ended all 3 drives. So, maybe they would finish for touchdowns. Maybe Jalen would throw a touchdown, but you got to hang on to the ball and sustain offense in order to do it.
And if we are talking about, tweaking the scheme, they've got 1 extra day this week, but that feels like it's not something that can be just sort of a 1-week fix. What are the kinds of things that they can do, as the season comes down to the wire?
Well, I think it's going to help if they can run the ball. I mean, you look at the Cowboys, they run the ball fine. You look at the 49ers right now, McCaffrey goes for 72 on the first play. I mean, the better teams are running the ball. You saw the Giants run for 209 yards last night. Chicago ran the ball up and down the field against the Bears. I mean, the better teams are running the ball right now, and they're running it effectively. I always think this time of the year, you can tweak the passing game. You can find certain plays and certain to your point, Zach, you can create certain plays of misdirection and things of play action, but that kind of says, let's get the running game cranked up. And I feel like That's what they need to do. They need to get that cranked up. And that'd be the first, if you want to turn this thing around and have a good holiday season and a good final month, nothing breaks down a defense quicker, I don't care who it is, than running the ball down their throats.
2 weeks ago, Jalen Hurts was atop the MVP frontrunners. Then you saw what Brock Purdy did against the Eagles, Dak Prescott did against the Eagles. Jalen kind of falls down that list. How do you think Jalen's playing, and what would you like to see from him during this final month?
Well, it's always going to come down, to making plays. And so, he didn't do anything in the game against Dallas that looked special. Typical Jalen type plays where he's just extending, he's throwing on the dead run, he's finding somebody 30 yards down the field. We're not seeing the plays that can make him special, that have made him special. And, we've all sort of postured about, is this injuries to Jalen? Because, we're not going to find out. He's not going to say anything. I understand that. But is his reluctance to just take off and just really pressure the defense because he can't? Or is it because the line is giving him a lot of protection and he's able to go through reads? But no, I don't know if any quarterback in the league has gotten better protected than Jalen has. I know Micah got a sack, but honestly, the pocket's been pretty good. You would expect better throws from Jalen at this point.
All right, let's get into something that's even a little bit more depressing for the Eagles, and that is the state of the defense at the moment. One of the worst defenses in the league over the second half of the season so far. Dead last in third down defense. The pass rush is not getting home, which you and I talked about last week. I guess if we are trying to come out of the depressing part of it, what are your reasons for optimism? What are your reasons for hope about the defense over the final 4 regular season games?
Well, first of all, the overall communication on the back end of this defense is atrocious. And so they're constantly looking around like, I thought you had them. I thought we were – like the communication has to get cleaned up, number one. I would say, maybe getting the linebackers back, Zach Cunningham back in the lineup, they'll get some stability there at that position. But honestly – man coverage is a big problem for this team right now. When they're in man coverage because they're blitzing or they think this is the best way to defend it or down a distance or who they're playing against, man coverage is an issue. And it's everybody. It's Bradbury, it's Slay at times, it's whoever's playing the slot, whether it's Roby or Ricks or whoever it is. San Francisco wanted to put 4 receivers on the field because they didn't think they had 4 corners they could cover. And it's true. And so how do you cover that? Well, you've got to play better zone. All right, and maybe take more chances at blitzing, over it, or overload blitzes or zone pressures. They got to start mixing it up here because it's been too easy for just about every quarterback that they've gone up against.
In the locker room after the game, there was some frustration from Josh Sweat, and this defense, the defense is built around the front. You're not seeing prolific sack numbers this year, especially on third downs. Why aren't they getting to the quarterback at the rate they need to?
Well, I thought last year Javon Hargrave was the key to their whole pass rush, 70 sacks. His ability just to push the pocket and collapse it from the interior, they're not getting that from Jalen Carter, and they're not getting that. Obviously, the play with Fletcher and Jalen, they got a big play out of that. So I can't say it's not there. But it's not there at the rate that it was a year ago when they had a good tackle rotation and Fletcher played probably his best year ever. And you had Fletcher and Javon pushing from the inside. And so whether it was Sweat or Hassan or Brandon, they all were feasting when quarterbacks were holding the ball. And they're playing better quarterbacks this year. Quarterbacks that know how to beat the edge rushers and know how to step up and elude them at times. And Hassan had a couple good rushes the other day. And so did Josh, but not enough to affect the game where the rush is affecting the game. The ball is getting tipped. It's coming out hot. You're getting balls. They're not getting the interceptions like they did last year. And so it all starts up front. And last year, they really didn't have to blitz. Jonathan Gannon, people complained about it, but they didn't have to blitz. And this year, I feel like they have to blitz a lot more in order to get quick pressure on the quarterback.
And they have been so bad when they do blitz, they have been getting gashed on those plays. If we turn our attention to the Seahawks, I hear you talking about they can't cover. They struggle in man-to-man defense. Now, even though the Seahawks team is coming off 4 losses in a row, 5 of their last 6. They've still got DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba and Tyler Lockett. That seems like they're going to like those matchups in the passing game, whether it's Geno Smith or not. What would concern you for the Eagles about this matchup?
Those 3 guys. Because honestly, I mean, Drew Lock played last week. Drew played well. I mean, they were in that game with the 49ers. I mean, it ended up, I mean, they gave up some big plays, but DK got behind the 49ers defense. Travarius Ward went out, and they took advantage of it. Drew Lock played really well, I thought. Defensively, they lost Evan Witherspoon early in that game, and they were playing without Trey Brown. They had a lot of injuries. They caught Jamal Adams flat-footed a couple of times, and they went past him. I mean, the Eagles are going to see the same thing with Jamal. He's a limited player. He looks more like a weak side linebacker than he does a safety. And so you got to figure out ways to attack him, because the 49ers did last week. You got the ball over the top. But what scares me is literally DK can catch a hit screen and go to the house, or he can run right by you and go to the house. And when they get away from throwing him the ball like they did in the second and third quarters last week, the offense falls flat. But the other thing that would concern me is Kenneth Walker got back last week, and he's a really good player. Him and Zach Charbonnet, like, it's a good 1-2 punch. And, as long as Pete Carroll's there, they're going to want to try to run the football. And so they got their starting offensive line out there last week, Big Abe Lucas at right tackle, but he's been in and out of the lineup. So you'll see Jason Peters out there, at right tackle. And, Hassan Reddick should say, okay, that's a 40-year-old man out there. I better, make him pay for being out there at age 40.
As a follow-up to that, and you started referencing it there, Bo mentioned this 4-game losing streak. They're struggling more than the Eagles are. I know it's a tough place to play. Eagles haven't beaten the Seahawks since 2008, but where's the advantage for the Eagles? How do they beat them?
Well, I think right now that defensively, they're giving up a lot of points. They did to the Cowboys last week. They did last week to the 49ers. I mean, you gotta go into this game thinking we got to put 30 up. We got to start with 30. I mean, you got to outscore them. And really, Cleveland could have beaten them at home. They're not unbeatable at home. Yes, the 12th man is there, and it is loud. But a lot of teams have gone in there and won big, including the 49ers. So recently, and Cleveland played very well. They should have won the game. So I don't know, if Geno is back or not yet. But regardless, you got to make those quarterbacks. You got to force those quarterbacks into mistakes, because they're both capable of creating them.
Last thing I want to ask you about, Baldy, you mentioned Jason Peters. It's so funny that he is, like, I feel like the longevity of his career is so impressive, but it has sort of taken away our memory of just how elite he was at the height of his powers. A potential Hall of Famer. I would say that he is a Hall of Famer. And he's this guy who was like the most interesting man in the locker room for so long for the Eagles. I'm just wondering if you have like a favorite Jason Peters story.
Well, I remember when he had just completed his rookie free agent year in Buffalo, and the offensive line coach was a good friend of mine, and Mouse was his coach, and I was out there at minicamp, and so I was just talking to him about his offensive line, what he's got going on, and he just pointed to Jason Peters, and he just told me, he goes, "Look, this guy is going to be a great player." And I was like, okay, well, I think he was a tight end in college and didn't really play tackle, and he was big and looked like he could run, but I didn't know if he'd ever really played. And sure enough, he took over in Buffalo, was playing great, and Andy obviously made the trade for him, and and history was made. But if you ask Lane Johnson right now, if you went in the locker room and asked Lane Johnson who's the biggest influence in his career, I mean, obviously Stoutland's been fantastic. He was the Bear since day one, but he would say Jason Peters. He'd say Jason, from everything from the get off to protection, you name it. He would say Jason Peters is his biggest influence. And if Lane Johnson becomes a Hall of Famer too, I'm sure he's going to thank Jason Peters for a lot of good lessons that he learned from him.
If I can wrap this up with one big picture question, because you have the unique perspective of knowing Philly and Philly fans and the Eagles really well, but you also are in tune with the rest of the league. how concerned should Eagles fans be, if at all? Is this just a tough portion of the schedule where they play two of the best teams in the league and they still are one of the top teams? Or are you seeing signs that this is a problem?
Zach, I could easily say, like I was talking to Fred Warner the other day, and they lost 3 games in the middle of the season, and the sky was falling in San Francisco. But I always thought San Francisco's defense could always, pitch a shutout. They did. They came out of their bye week, went to Jacksonville. They put up 3 points against them. I felt like their defense, no matter what happened to the quarterback or the offense, whether, Debo came back or not, that the defense could carry. I don't feel that way about the Eagles right now. I don't feel like the defense can carry them, and that there is any quick fixes. You asked me how do you fix it? I don't think there is a fix right now. And so I worry about this team because defensively, if they have to see San Francisco or Dallas in the playoffs, I don't believe they can slow them down. And so offensively, I feel like they can get back and straighten things out, and they can put up 30 points on good teams and down the stretch. I don't think defensively they can keep the score down in a playoff game against 2 teams that they just lost to.
All right. Well, wise words as always from Brian Baldinger. We look forward to talking to you next week, Baldy. Enjoy the week and get some rest.
Yeah, I plan on doing that. Thank you. All right,
thanks,
guys.
Baldy.
Talk to you next week.
Back with more on the PHLY Eagles podcast.
We all silly like the mayor.